Hey, welcome to another episode of Inquiring Minds. I am Steve Harper. With me is my amazing co-host, the illustrious, incredible, stupendously awesome Donna Carlin.
Seriously? Okay. You're gonna go with that, are you?
No, you're supposed to say, "Okay, yes, that's true. That is all. It's all
Okay.
accurate."
Shaking my head. What am I gonna do with you?
I'm gonna
It
have to
is
come
what's
up with
going
some
through
bigger
my mind
words
right
though
now.
to expand my vocabulary of your awesomeness. How about that? Well, I'm excited to be on another episode with you. I mean, we have been getting some tremendous feedback from our audience. We really are grateful for everybody that's tuning in, whether you're hearing Inquiring Minds on any of the podcast platforms or via our YouTube or Facebook channel or community. We greatly appreciate you. However you got here, we're grateful to have you. But what are we talking about today, Donna?
So, how do you like this one? I'm looking forward to your reaction to this. When you blame others, you give up your power to change.
Ooh, give up your power to change. I need a little more context on this one because at the end of the day, I know that I fall into this bad habit sometimes of the blame game, and of course, I think my ego tells me that it's always has to be right or wrong, right? At the end of the day, and it's always the other person that did you dirty, did it wrong, and you, of course, are completely exonerated from any bad doing or any of your bad actions. And I can see where we build up that resistance and that wall so that we may not recognize our part in, say, a dispute or an issue or a conflict or even a conversation that just goes off track. We always want to blame the other person for what it is, but we're also not allowing ourselves to recognize, maybe they had a point. Maybe I could have handled this better. And how would I go about either trying to fix that situation or rectify the issue or admit, hey, maybe I don't have all the answers?
The point is, if you're gonna blame someone else for what happened to you, you're stuck in the blame game and you're not saying, what was my contribution? How might I have to change in order to change the outcome? That's the whole point. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone has somewhat of a contribution to an outcome. So if I'm saying, it's Steve's fault that this happened,
Mm-hmm.
and it would never have occurred if X didn't happen first, or if he didn't do this.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you owning your point in anything that you need to change in some way? Change your approach, change your mindset, change your how do you put this kindly? I'm trying to be kind here. Change your insistence on being right
Yes.
and
Yes.
making someone else wrong. If you're right about everything, why in the world would you have to change? So
Well,
blame
yeah.
gives up your personal power to change because you're putting it on somebody else.
Well, and I think it's interesting because as you look at this topic, I think the natural tendency is as human beings is to, default to right or wrong. And in our own view and our own perspective, our own filters that we use to look at a certain circumstance, again, a situation with another person, it's easy for us to, exonerate ourselves from any of the wrongdoing because we're so quick and so adamant that there has to be a winner and a loser, and we're the winner in every dispute, right? And so I think that it's an interesting perspective because it requires you to actually acknowledge, even briefly, that you could potentially be wrong in this situation and ask yourself, like we've been really good at through these episodes, asking those second level questions. Well, was I wrong? Was that situation something that maybe I didn't know all the facts, didn't know everything that was occurring? Their response and their reaction, maybe they didn't know all the facts, but doesn't make them necessarily the bad guy or gal because they did it the way they did it. It's just that's what they knew at the time. But maybe we need to have a deeper, more intimate conversation about whatever the topic is.
What if I changed my approach? What if I changed my mindset? What if I changed my impression or opinion on something? What would a different outcome be? That's what I'm always curious about.
Yeah.
If you don't go there and you say it's Steve's fault that this happened, and you don't ask those questions about your contribution to something, then why would you change?
Yeah.
And are you so perfect that you don't ever have to change anything, get along with anybody, everybody, I should say, help play a part that is beyond you?
Yeah.
These are really important questions. And, the minute you do the blame game, it's so and so's fault. I understand that certain people own their contribution to a situation that is not the outcome that you wanted, for sure not. It still doesn't have to stop you from saying, what if my approach was different? What if my response to this horrible thing that so and so did was different? And, in a previous episode, I asked the question, which a lot of people get angry at me for, what is so perfect about this when it clearly isn't? And what is my role, within that? How do I view things as perfect when they clearly aren't? Even that is allowing yourself to put a change of thinking in place, change of response in place, all of that. You don't approach things from what is my piece of this,
Mm-hmm.
then you're abdicating. That's the word I'm looking for. Ability
Yeah.
to change thoughtfully, and that's never going to serve you.
That's well. So it's an
What does that
interesting
happen with
perspective.
you?
Yeah, I think people, when you pose that question to them, and the reason that they don't like hearing it is you're asking them to look deeper at the situation and their role in it, which they've automatically given themselves a pass for. Well, I have nothing to do with this. I was not me that didn't deliver. It wasn't me that said that. It wasn't me that did X, Y, and Z. But it could have been, or you could have contributed in some capacity. And rather than eviscerate the other person by just saying, "Yeah, I wash my hands of it because I didn't do it. It's I'm in the right, they're in the wrong." That question forces them to have to consider, could I have done something different? Could I have said something? Could I have spoken up? Could we have had a conversation before a decision was made? Could I have made my point of view a little bit more effectively or a little bit clearer? I find that when I work with coaching clients and these situations come up, and it often ends up being interpersonal relationships that are occurring amongst teams or in their personal or professional lives. There's this natural tendency for people to want to make themselves the hero in that story every time.
Yeah.
And the reality is that there's very little hero-esque behavior by trying to keep somebody on your thumb or push them down or go to the ends of the earth to prove that you are right and they are wrong. And I think that when you are you know, wanting to effectively become a better person, a better leader, a better spouse, a better friend, you have to be willing to give people some, courtesy of a pass. My wife always says, give them grace. They may not have known at the time what the circumstances were or how you'd respond or how you'd react. And that alone gets you to stop and kind of think about, well, maybe she's right. Maybe I should have looked at this thing differently. Maybe rather than just, blow up or get, upset or angry or frustrated and feel like I am more of the superior person within that situation, I do need to take a step back and do need to look at it. And rather than completely derail a relationship, which I've seen in work and I've seen in all sorts of professional relationships where all that great effort that you'd put forward, now because we are in dispute over something, just the simple fact of trying to make somebody feel so bad about being so wrong when
Yeah.
probably they aren't so wrong and you weren't probably so right, but because you weren't willing to come to the table with an open mind and a willingness to acknowledge but move on, you turn that relationship sour and potentially, completely, in a negative light point forward.
Exactly. And the two words that really help, and that is next time. Even if you're angry at somebody for doing something that blindsided you,
Yeah.
when you say next time I'm going to look at it in this light, or next time this is what I need to do for myself in order to influence this in not happening again. The next time takes the weight away from what happened, and I should have done this or they should have done that, and all of the, ruminating on what was over and over and over again, so that it becomes cemented in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, to say, what could I do differently next time? And that already is guiding you on the path of change in some way, shape, or form. Change in engagement, change in trust level, change in what you need to contribute to influence the outcome, change in some way, shape, or form, so it's not purely someone else's fault, because you are responsible for yourself, your thoughts, feelings, actions, everything else. And to that end, if you're relinquishing that responsibility to someone else, saying it's their fault that this happened in my life, or this happened in this situation, you are literally giving up your personal power to change.
Yeah, and you
However,
well, I was going to just
uh,
say
uh,
real quick, and you back yourself into a corner that you can't get out of.
and it's more than that, because if they turn it around and something happens that's really successful, they also own that success, because you
Mm-hmm.
did not change in order to contribute to the success. So
Yep.
think about that too.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. Well, it's I find that this is a topic that people are uncomfortable addressing for themselves because they are having to acknowledge the possibility of being wrong, or maybe not being 100% right. And what I find in today's world, especially in a lot of the interpersonal dynamics you see in especially in the business world, there is a lot of ego and there is a lot of reputation guarding. There's a lot of this kind of posturing in how people respond, react, how they collaborate, what they do, what they contribute, and people don't really set the rules of the game right from the jump to be in their favor. And one of the things that I think is that people get resentment when they feel like somebody has done something wrong, or a mistake has been made. The resentment often comes from not just the action of the other person, but sometimes it comes from our own personal frustration that we didn't say something when we should have said something, or we didn't do something along the way to maybe help guide and direct. We're more than happy to try and put somebody in their place by making them feel bad, but we're not willing to step up to the plate to recognize our potential role in whatever that outcome was, right or wrong, right? And I do think that one of the things that would be helpful for our audience to recognize is on these situations where you tend to run into and you hit these barriers or these blocks in these relationships. Have you ever thought about potentially resetting that conversation? Say, every time we work on a project together, we tend to be on opposite sides of the situation, or we tend to come at it from different perspectives that lead to some anxiety and stress and frustration. How about we don't do that? How about we actually come to the table on this next one, the next time? How do we fix this? And I'd love to hear your thoughts. I've got a few thoughts. Let's see if we can find some common denominators by which we can operate and work, and let's set the rules of the game so that we both walk away feeling like we are both the winner. And that's the goal, right? And people might say, well, that just doesn't work in the real world, Steve. It's because you haven't tried it, and it's because you haven't done it, and it's because in most cases people are super uncomfortable about putting conflict on the table. I had a good friend that's an attorney of mine that was talking about our contract, and a contract is only in the spirit of our relationship. What would happen if we need to end that relationship? What are the rules of the game by which we're all agreeing to when we come to the table? And I think about that in terms of how you write that up in a business deal, or securing a service or a product for somebody. That agreement is by is how we're going to guide and direct us if things don't go the way we expect it to go. And I think that there can be a verbal approach to this exact same thing when you're sitting down and talking to people that are important to the process or critical to your team, or could even just be the dispute you have with your neighbor over who cuts whose tree. Let's sit
Right.
down, let's have a cup of coffee, let's talk about our rules of engagement going forward. And I recognize, and I think your strength right off the bat is to admit, I may not see everything that you're seeing. And I'd like you to help me figure out your perspective or your point of view. And this only becomes a win for us both if we're both being able to feel like we are equally heard, understood, and we're able to contribute. And so you may not necessarily be able to solve every circumstance, every situation. But I think if you're coming to the table, you're at least allowing that other party to know that there's maybe something here to work with, right?
Oh, for sure. And people who say it doesn't work to put conflict on the table, make it about you. And what I mean by that is, when this happened last time, it really didn't sit well for with me for so many reasons. And what I think what I think happened is that we lost the focus on what the desired end result really is.
Yeah.
And I would love to say to you, let's sit down, put our heads together, agree that we are trying to achieve the same thing, the same desired end result, and what will our individual contributions be to get us there.
Yeah.
And it's much harder to be in conflict when you invite somebody into a conversation to achieve what they also want to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say, this really weighed upon me, it didn't sit well with me, I don't like being in conflict with you, I want to work with you in a way that brings us both a lot of energy and feeling that we've accomplished something that we both want to accomplish. So let's put our heads together and make that happen. It's
Yeah.
an invitation. It's really hard for somebody to find fault and to get angry at you for inviting them in. What you're not doing is saying, I don't want any part of you, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
What you're doing is saying, I do want to tap into the wisdom that you bring to the table. Let's harness both of our wisdom and do something great with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And that's a different conversation altogether.
Well, and
So,
part of your adaptability in terms of the change that I think that we're trying to put on the table is when you examine these things, you could go about and say, okay, I could have handled this better. I could have responded better. I could have communicated more efficiently to, help this process along. So the next time that we sit down, I think the key factor for people to take away is you don't spend a whole lot of time on what the last dispute was because it's unproductive and it raises bad feelings that could now
mhm.
pollute the new pond of conversation or collaboration. And so when you own it as that individual and say, look, things didn't work out exactly as I expected it the last time, and you phrased it perfectly. So I really want to come to the table with a spirit of collaboration and cooperation, and I want us to both walk away feeling really good about the interaction, like we can, we've accomplished something together, and that we ultimately, at the end of the day, deliver the result we're both looking for, right? And I think what tends to happen is people choose their battlegrounds even before there's a battle. And
Yeah.
wow, based on that last project, Steve, he just, he was late. He didn't, do what he was told to do, or he put in half an effort. And look at me, I'm doing all the work. I'm doing all this. You have to catch yourself in that moment and not repeat history because that was then, this is now. And you have to find a way to, to be able to organize going forward and to a certain degree have a little bit of humility when you come to that table to say, look, things didn't go well the last time. Wasn't because you screwed it up, Donna. You don't have to say that. You just say, look, at the end of the day, I think we can all agree we didn't end up in a place that was really felt good or comfortable. Let's not do that again. And I'm prepared
Yeah.
to come to the table and give my best effort and be a bit more of a contributor. And I want you to feel comfortable to communicate and share with me. So you know, let's set the rules of engagement here so that we end up with the best possible outcome. And I think that,
Exactly.
if people are willing to do that, it doesn't matter that you haven't done it before. Doing it now can completely change the dynamic of that relationship because guaranteed, if you were steaming and upset because somebody screwed up, they were feeling equally as bad because they probably didn't want to be the person responsible for screwing up. And so giving people an opportunity, giving them that grace, as my wife would say, to come back and hold space for them to work from here and, change the outcome, I think is the best possible solution.
Definitely, for
Yeah.
sure. And at the same time, remember to cut yourself some slack as well, and give yourself permission to admit that you weren't perfect.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, Donna, this has been another amazing conversation. I hope this gives people some really strong food for thought. We'd love to hear your feedback, whether you're catching Inquiring Minds on YouTube or on Facebook or on any of the easy for me to say, podcast platforms. We are grateful that you got here, and we're anxious to continue the conversation. So, Donna, how can they do that? How can they give some impressions about what they have picked up on this episode or any of our prior episodes?
Join our Facebook group. It's Inquiring Minds with Donna Carlin, Steve Harper, and let us know what your thoughts are, what you'd like us to discuss, how this impacts you, how we were dead on or dead wrong, whatever your perspective is. We'd love to hear it. You could reach Steve at ripplecentral.com and me at Donna Carlin with a K.com. And, you could access our social media through there. We post a lot on LinkedIn, on Twitter, all over the place, actually. So join us in conversation in every way that you can because we value your input. And we're getting
Absolutely.
a lot of great comments.
Yep.
So join the club.
Yes, absolutely. We would love that. Well, Donna, thank you for another amazing episode of Inquiring Minds. You constantly stretch me, and this was a topic that really has me thinking about a couple of circumstances that I could have personally done better, and I will the next time. So thank you for that. And I just want to say thanks for doing the show and being so awesome with these topics because they're definitely getting people thinking. I guarantee you. So we'll look forward to being back in another episode very soon.
I'm looking forward to it too. You have a fantastic day.
You too.